back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Sam Menzie. We've got a show for you today. We'll be going over the MLB trade deadline, recapping it from yesterday. I'm going over all the action that I was not able to talk about yesterday, all the stuff that happened after I went on air. So we'll be focusing on the Jack Flaherty and Tanner Scott deals first, then going over all the other significant trades, American League, National League, and then in the end I'll be going over the Giants trade deadline as well. But before we do all that, I would like to ask you to please like and follow the show. We do get a number of questions from viewers, so to ensure that your question does get read in the air, please use the link, gsmcpodcast.net. It really does help the show, and it really does mean a lot, so thank you so much for that. And let's get back into the show for today. All right, so our first topic is going to be about Jack Flaherty to the Dodgers. I would say unrivaled, the biggest deal from yesterday. Absolutely huge, and just an incredible contract there by Flaherty. And I wanted to, not incredible contract, but I should say an incredible trade by the Dodgers, and I wanted to go over that, so let's get into it. So, with Flaherty, I think going into the last day of the trade deadline, he was undoubtedly the biggest name that was probably going to move at this year's deadline. All the other guys that were pretty significant were either we knew were going to be traded, either we knew were not going to be traded or were traded already. Randy Arozarena was already traded. We knew Garrett Crochet wasn't going to get traded at this point. I think it was pretty obvious after he made all those demands. So going into this last day, Jack Flaherty, I'd say, was the biggest fish out there still on the market. And the Dodgers, of course, were able to get him. This was something that I had predicted for a little while now. I thought that the Dodgers made perfect sense for Jack Flaherty, and I did end up getting that prediction right. So, I guess. But Flaherty had a really interesting trade deadline. At first, we thought that he was probably going to the Yankees. Bob Nightingale tweeted that out. And now we learned that the Yankees and the Tigers were actually in agreement on a Flaherty trade, but the Yankees were scared off by Flaherty's medical. So that's a really interesting thing that kind of throws a wrench in all this that I will be talking about after as well. So very interesting there. But yeah, so first I want to go over this trade for the Dodgers and just give my thoughts on it. Do I like it? Do I not? Just overall, and let's get into that. So, first off, do I like this trade for the Dodgers? Yes. I mean, how can you not like this trade? The Dodgers basically got all their needs done at the trade deadline before this day. They got a shortstop in Tommy Edman. They got a back-end reliever in Michael Kopech. And they needed a frontline starting pitcher, and they get the best one on the market in Jack Flaherty. I mean, obviously Skubal and Crochet are better, but I think going into yesterday, we kind of knew that both Skubal and Crochet were extremely unlikely to move, extremely unlikely. So overall for this Dodgers team, being able to get this guy and really get one of your biggest needs fixed, a top-end starting pitcher, was a really good job. You have a very good starting rotation, yes, but a lot of these guys have been off the injured list this year, and you needed another guy to really help solidify this rotation, and that's what you get with Flaherty here. He's had an absolutely fantastic season in Detroit, had a really rough couple of past years with St. Louis after being one of the best pitchers in baseball for a few years, kind of went on and off with injuries a little bit, and then got traded to Baltimore last year, was horrible there as a trade deadline acquisition for them, and then signed a big deal with the Tigers for 1 year, kind of like a Luis Severino type deal for this offseason, trying to get your career back on track. And he did exactly that with the Tigers, was absolutely fantastic with them, and became one of the biggest available people at the deadline once we knew that the Tigers would be sellers and that they weren't doing as great this year. So Dodgers needed a frontline starting pitcher, and they got it in Flaherty, and it's a great move. You have a lot of starting pitching depth, but a lot of these guys have been on and off the injured list this year. Now, the thing I want to say is that as much as I like this deal for Flaherty, I think that there are some question marks that come with it. First of all, the injury thing. We talked about it before, but he was almost traded to the Yankees, and the reason he wasn't was because the Yankees got scared off by his medicals, specifically his back. He's had a lot of back injuries in his career. I think that was one of the main reasons why he kind of failed in St. Louis, and teams knew this, and the Yankees... what it said in the article was that you only get to see his medicals if you're in agreement on a trade. So obviously the Tigers and the Yankees had agreed on compensation. They agreed what prospects were going out, all that kind of stuff. I think Nestor Cortez would have probably been involved in that Tigers trade, and then the Tigers would have also gone one more prospect, but I'm not exactly sure how that would have worked out. Again, we'll probably never know. But the fact that the Yankees saw Flaherty's medicals shows that they were in agreement on a trade to send Flaherty to the Bronx. But once they saw the medicals, were like, no, we don't want that. Kind of got scared off. So the Dodgers have had a ton of injured pitchers on the injured list this year. That made no sense, that sentence. But they've had a lot of injuries to their pitching staff this year. So as much as Flaherty is great, and as much as he is a great, great pitcher that is going to help you out a lot, is it the best idea to acquire a starting pitcher that also has significant injury needs, enough for the Yankees of all people to say, no, we don't want you, and then trade for him? I mean, the Dodgers' potential rotation in the playoffs, let's say, will be this. Okay? Tyler Glasnow, Jack Flaherty, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Clayton Kershaw. I think we can all agree on that. You maybe have Walker Buehler as the 5, let's say, but usually you don't have a 5-man rotation in the playoffs, especially for the Dodgers, who are likely to not play in a wild card game. You really only need 4 guys. We have Glasnow, who has never had a fully healthy season in his entire career and has been on the injury list already once this year. You have Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who is going to be out till September with an injury, and Clayton Kershaw, who's missed the entire first half of this year with an injury. So as much as the Flaherty trade is very good, and I like it, and it was a clear need that you needed to upgrade with, getting another frontline starting pitcher, the question becomes, how significant are these injury risks? Because you, again, already have a starting rotation full of injury-prone people. Yamamoto, again, out till September. Kershaw missed the entire season so far because of injury. Glasnow has never had a fully healthy season. Walker Buehler, I mean, don't even get me started on his injuries. So those are really your 5 guys that you're probably going to go into the playoffs with wanting to make a start with you. So as much as Flaherty is very good, and I like the trade, it's just a question mark that you have to worry about for the rest of the year. Will Flaherty be able to hold up for the next 3 or so months for the rest of this regular season, of course, and then the playoffs? I mean, the Dodgers are obviously betting on the fact that they're going to have a long playoff run, and I have no reason to really disagree with them right now, with considering how good their team is. But the question becomes now, did you make a mistake trading for Jack Flaherty with his injury risks? There were a lot of other pitchers on this market that are also very good, but didn't have the injury risk associated with them. Eric Fetty, someone you were in a trade with but did not get, obviously in the 3-team trade with St. Louis. Maybe you should have traded for him instead. He's under contract for next year as well at pretty cheap, and he hasn't had some injury risk this year. But again, he isn't really battle tested. Flaherty is. He's played in the playoffs with the Cardinals. So there is good and a bad. The good, he's a very good pitcher, battle tested in the playoffs, knows what he's getting into. Also, we have to say, he's from LA. I would be shocked if he doesn't re-sign with the Dodgers in the offseason. I don't think this is the thing where you're just looking at this as a rental. I think this is where the Dodgers are looking at this as, okay, we're going to trade for Flaherty. He's going to re-sign and come and spend the rest of his career hopefully in Dodger blue, where he grew up a fan of and grew up in LA. I mean, I think that's what's going to happen. Again, I'd be pretty shocked if Flaherty doesn't re-sign with the Dodgers in the offseason, so it's also a long-term play as well. But again, just looking for this year, as it is a rental, he does have some injury risk associated with him, enough for a team who agreed to trade for him not trade for him. Say, no, we don't want you because of your medicals. So I think that's an interesting thing. But the thing is, they also probably gave up a lot less in the prospect department because of the injury things. I mean, they gave up a good prospect, and I believe his name is I cannot pronounce the name, I apologize. It's a power hitting catching prospect. I can't really pronounce his name to the fullest degree. I apologize about that. I don't want to butcher it. I always feel bad when I butcher names. But you did give up a lesser prospect in this regard because of the injury risk, or I'm assuming. When we saw the Jack Flaherty return at the end of the deadline, we were like, okay, that's a fine return for Detroit, but compared to everyone else, I mean, looking at what Trevor Rogers and Yusei Kikuchi got, you figured you'd get more for the guy who is undoubtedly the top available starting pitcher on this market, the real available. Again, not Tariq Skubal and Garrett Crochet available, real available. So that's also factoring in as well. So there's a lot of things that are good and bad here, but overall, I think just the basis of it, very good deal for Los Angeles, getting a frontline starting pitcher like Flaherty, who is going to have no problem adjusting to LA, quote-unquote adjusting. He's from there, who I'm sure will be a long-term piece of this rotation as well. Detroit now, I like the prospect they got back. Power hitting catching guy, I think could be up by maybe 2026, maybe 2025, if you really do want to push it. So it will be interesting to end up watching what does happen with him here. They do have a very good farm system, and it was obvious that you were going to trade Flaherty once it was very obvious that this team was not going to be competitive. Thyron Laurizano, I probably am butchering that name, I apologize, but that's who the Tigers got back again. 21-year-old switch hitting catching prospect, has a lot of power, has really shown it out through the minor leagues. Is struggling a little bit in A+ ball this year, but I'm very confident that he is going to be able to transition very nicely. and become a good player for this Tigers team again. I expect him to be the starting catcher for this Tigers team by the end of 2025 or the start of 2026. So a guy can come up, not soon, but not far away. I mean, he's 21, so I think, it's not something you're looking at in the distant future. So I like the prospect they got back for him. Honestly, though, I would have considered extending him if he was open to that. I think that next year you could really be competitive if your hitters start to hit and play like you expect them to, and then you would have an elite top of the rotation with Tarek Skubal and Jack Flaherty. So I would have considered that, but I like the prospect they got back for him. And overall, this Tigers team is going to be really interesting to watch for the future and what does happen. With the Dodgers, again, this is what they needed. They needed a frontline starting pitcher. They got the other needs. They got what else they wanted. Ahmed Rosario, nice bench bat. We'll talk about Kevin Kiermaier as well in the other part of the show. Tommy Edman, really nice starting shortstop for the future. And they needed a frontline starting pitcher in Flaherty. They got him, brought him back home to LA. So nice trade there. So that was my first segment talking about Jack Flaherty and him being traded to his hometown Dodgers. Going over to the second segment here, which is going to be talking about Tanner Scott and the trade that sent him to the San Diego Padres from the Miami Marlins. So we'll be going over that, and we'll see you after the break. So thanks, and bye.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please